So welcome everybody to this IFMA webinar, proudly sponsored by SoftBank Robotics. Our topic today is, can cobotics accelerate recovery post-COVID-19? We have an excellent panel lined up for you that I'm happy to introduce to you in a moment. But let me first start by going over the agenda of this webinar. We'll first start by briefly explaining what cobotics is. Then the discussion will be organized around the 4 pillars of cobotics in facility cleaning. And we'd love to interact with our audience today. So we'll be raising 2 questions via a poll and end the discussion with a Q&A. On today's topic, SoftBank Robotics has prepared a free white paper to download, The Cobotics Evolution in Cleaning, and we'll show this link again at the end of the webinar, and attendees will also receive the download link via email after this webinar. So let's start this webinar with the big question, what is cobotics? Cobotics is the collaboration between frontline workers and machines or robots. So cobots is short for collaborative robots. Now, in the report that SoftBank Robotics has made available for free download, there are some interesting stats that can be used as a basis for our discussion today. If we looked at 73% of FM leaders believe that cobotics has the potential to transform the cleaning industry. 81% see cobotics as a potential solution to cleaning challenges over the next 5 years. And 77% predict that cobotics will enable them to win new clients through proof of performance and innovation. As I mentioned in the beginning, we'll be basing our discussion on 4 pillars of cobotics in facility cleaning. We'll cover the technology and performance part of it. We'll cover finance, productivity, and resourcing related to that. Obviously, employee well-being and retention are essential in the discussion, and we'll end our discussion with deployment and the operational side of it. Let me now introduce to you our 4 experts in our panel. I'll start with Niels van der Zijl. Welcome to the panel, Niels. Previously at IBM, Niels has more than 20 years experience bringing together technology and people to drive improved performance and outcomes within business across a range of sectors. Now at SoftBank Robotics, Niels is spearheading the company's effort to accelerate innovation within the FM and cleaning industries in EMEA. We also have the pleasure to welcome Alexander Granderat. Alexander started to work for Amitech Inc. as General Manager Europe, Middle East and Africa in 1995. In April 2000, Alexander joined General Electric as a Sales Operation Manager and General Manager for Power Controls, Germany and Austria, where he was promoted in 2002 to Sales General Manager for Industrial Products for the European region. In 2003, Alexander joined Danaher's European Bottig platform as President Europe of Haag-Lange and was appointed Group Executive and President of the Cavo Dental businesses. From 2010 to 2020, he was Country Manager of ISIS Germany, and he is currently a member of multiple boards and works as a business angel. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you, Laura.
We also have Peter Ankersterne on board. Peter has more than 25 years experience covering most aspects of facility management, service management, outsourcing, marketing, and strategy, and was employed by the ISS Group for 24 years. After a year as head of digital FM and workplace experience EMEA at WeWorks, powered by We, he joined Jones Lang LaSalle on April 1st this year as Global Lead FM and Employee Experience. Welcome, Peter. And last but not least, we have Diana Steinbach on the panel. Diana Steinbach is the Vice President of International Services at ISSA, the Worldwide Cleaning Industry Association. She is based in Mainz, Germany, and has been in the professional cleaning industry for more than 20 years, helping people identify new trends, strategically plan, develop business alliances, connect with customers, and position themselves for the greatest successes. Welcome, everybody, to this webinar. Now let's start with raising a first question. How is cobotics different to previous attempts to innovate within the facility management and cleaning industry in EMEA? And I would like to give the word to Niels to look at this from a technology and performance perspective. Niels, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Lara. It's great to be here. So I think I can answer that question in various ways, but most importantly, the technology actually works as proven. Deliver better outcomes for all stakeholders, whether you're a manager or end user or buildings of and frontline staff, of course. So if you take a cobot like Whiz, which is our cobotic vacuum sweeper, then our independent studies have shown that it performs actually 50% better than improved performance than a manual vacuum cleaner. It is about 100% more consistent, and it frees up more than 2 hours of a cleaner's time during an average shift. So it's hugely powerful in terms of what it can do. Whiz can memorize up to 600 cleaning routes, vacuum about 1,500 square meters of carpet on a single chart. So all this means that cleaner buildings for clients and end users gives improved efficiency for senior management. And of course, not to underestimate, improved well-being and especially morale amongst the cleaner society. Cobotics is bringing game-changing benefits to the whole host of FM providers, both on the supply side, but also definitely in-house. So most organizations have actually already started on their cobotic journey in one way or another, and have experienced some of the benefits that are rapidly scaling up the deployment. The second point that I wanted to make was more about the ease of use and the management and measurement, because cobots can be instructed and managed easily by frontline teams and can record, measure, evaluate all times and demonstrate the improvements in performance that they are delivering. So then, I guess thirdly, and this is really critical, cobotic technology is designed to support frontline workers. They're taking away the real repetitive and strenuous work, allowing them really to focus on the high value and rewarding work. So as you said, Lara, earlier on, cobots are all about collaboration, collaborative robots. They're definitely not a threat to the existing teams, and that means that usage and enthusiasm for adoption is high amongst people on the ground. So this is not technology that brings up, being discarded by frontline staff, left in a cupboard for months or years. It operates as part of the team and makes a real difference to people, everyday working lives. And as we all know, that's a big change to many of the failed technology investments. And I've seen some in my last 20 years. So I think I can really relate to some of the investments that haven't paid off. And finally, just returning to your lead question, can robotics accelerate the recovery for FM? Well, absolutely. Improving performance, consistency in service delivery, offering greater efficiencies, productivity, overcoming issues, and supporting frontline workers who find themselves under immense pressure, especially in these given times that we're living in today.
Well, I'm happy you already answered the title question, actually, the topic of the, so we can actually close this down. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for this. I hear you saying that cobotics go hand in hand with people. They work as part of the team. What about the financial aspect of cobotics? How is that working in the total aspect of the cleaning within FM?
So I think from a financial perspective, we see a range of savings being applied. The interesting part of Wiz is that we've introduced an OPEX model, so not a standard CAPEX model, which means that there's no initial outlay, which has been the case with most machinery in the cleaning and FM industry to date. Hence why the adoption rate is a lot higher. We are seeing ROI, different ranges between 10 to 20%. I think this is a really early stage of giving that definitive numbers. I think the bottom line is, as I said earlier on, it's really about making it collaboration and working together to achieve and reinvent business, because we've seen too many examples of innovations that haven't paid off. This is just not just about the financial rewards that this will bring, and there are certainly, as we've already seen, are several financial benefits, but it's then really going into the behavioral change that's going to allow us to make the adoption possible.
Great to hear that. We've been talking a little bit about the fact that they would better perform than humans, that they're 100% consistent. Diana, if I may address you here, what are your thoughts on the productivity and the resourcing when it comes to cobotics within the cleaning industry?
Sure. So I think there's a couple different factors that we need to look at. One is that, as it's been stated, performance is more consistent and reliable. So what does that mean in practice? For example, retailers have been one sector that have been early adopters of robotics or cobotics, and that's because we've seen as many as 70% or more have said that they have less confidence that their stores are actually consistent with their cleaning. And sometimes that's because they've got associates doing some of the work and not always a cleaning company. So that's why so many of them have taken this up, as many as sometimes 40% in some countries, because they say this allows them to reallocate those associates to other tasks like face-to-face with the customers. In a more traditional cleaning environment, then that means reallocating those people to other cleaning tasks. And then there's also measurable outcomes. One international hotel, they reported improvements of more than 40% on their labor just due to some of their cobotics implementation. And that's because they were able to, of course, put people into other tasks. Now, one might ask, okay, what are those tasks that we need to be worried about? And right now, because of COVID-19, you're seeing that, of course, high touch points, which are above the ground, maybe not as easy to handle with robotics, are a high sensitive point that need to be addressed. So by implementing cobotics, instead of having to do do more with less, you're doing things in parallel. And that allows you to then spend the time, because the reality of disinfecting is that it requires more time to address that surface. If I need dwell time for that disinfectant to work, then I have automatically extended the amount of time that work takes in that building. But if I can layer and have the floors being done by a robot, for instance, while my workers are taking that extra time on disinfecting, that can really be more effective. And we have to look at the numbers behind that as well. When you are properly addressing a surface, when you have the risk of a virus, you can eliminate as much as 60% greater the amount of viruses that are on that surface and contaminating it. And that can actually lead to a reduction of up to 80% risk of cross-contamination. And we've seen that with studies on cold and flu, and those are also envelope viruses, just like the the SARS-CoV-2 virus that we're addressing today. So when you look at that risk reduction right now and the ability to address that in a tight environment, that really can make a difference. You're facing with, some facilities are 24/7, so you only have a small window where you have low enough traffic to hit certain work, and you have to get this all done in that same amount of time. So that becomes more critical. I would say just one last point too about productivity would be the precise operation. So when you have that ability to have the robotics doing a more precise job than possibly the humans can, then you're also making sure that there's that greater reassurance that that work is done the first time, and that you're not having to waste time and effort to come back, and money, to have to bring people back around to reallocate to fix what might have been missed. And so that all comes together to create a more holistic approach to applying your cleaning investment than you might have had when you had a more traditional consecutive work approach. And that's more critical now than ever, as people are trying to address their stakeholders' concerns about occupant safety, and possibly having to do it with a similar budget, or having only so much that they can reinvest into these increased activities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think I hear you say that there's up to 80% risk reduction. I think in times like these are figures that speak to people. It's essential. People might be afraid to go back to work, be afraid to go back to the workplace. And then these type of numbers obviously can help to reestablish a work environment that is safe and reassures people to come back to the office. Excellent. Excellent. Now, if we look at the next question, what are the barriers to cobotics adoption in facility management, and how can we overcome them? Because I'm sure there's still a lot of questions around this. A lot of people prior to this session have asked us the question, what are cobotics? So obviously there's still a lot of people who don't know what it's about. And certainly there are some barriers when we are talking about this. What could be those barriers, and how can we overcome those? If we look at it from an employee well-being perspective, Alexander, what would your reaction be on this? What do you see as the barriers?
Yeah, thanks, Lara. Facility management is a people's business. If you look into our industry, value creation is done by 95% of our cost, which is labor cost. So the most important asset that the industry has is people. And during many, many years, the industry has invested a lot into educating people, enabling them to do certain things. But also the industry has always been an open door for people who were not that well educated to find a job, to get their first job ever, or if they're immigrants, even to get a good first foothold in a country and develop from there. And now we come and say, hey, we have this high technology, we have something that is called maybe artificial intelligence or deep learning and that kind of stuff. And we confront many different people with that at different levels of education. And understandably, there is a pretty wide range of reaction to that offer. While the guys here on the call most likely all fully understand what cobotics means and how it works and what connectivity means, we shouldn't forget that the workforce that we're dealing with in many areas are not that well educated and do not know really what it means and what connectivity means. And Lara, we have tried it several times before. At ISS in Germany since 2014 or 15, we had installed something that we called the lab, which was basically a building where we tried all kinds of technology. And we tried robots, we tried IoT, we implemented a lot of that stuff, but there were many dimensions that we had to look into and that intellectually first we didn't think about. And one, of course, is that we have to make sure that if you come with a new technology, there's an enormous amount of things that you need to tell your people. So to make them comfortable with it, to make them understand what's in for them, to make them understand that it's not necessarily a threat to their job, but that they can learn other things. And like Diana said, that there are other things that need to be done. And there is this balance in all ways of connectivity. So a new system like a cobot needs to connect to people, and that's why it's called a cobot and not just a robot. So we are trying to invest more into this relationship and understanding and making it easy to use for all kind of people. But also on the other hand, we have to understand that in the current COVID-19 situation, we have many thousand people, hundreds of thousands of people who are not doing their job currently, sitting at home, or only allowed to work 50% of the time or 70% of the time, or have lost their job already in the industry. And of course, there is a lot of fear now to finally lose the job. And at that point of time, we come in as an industry and say, here are robots. And of course, we are throwing that into a scenario where the fear can be even higher when we come with that. So it's also important that we teach people right, that we tell the right story, and that we put all of that together. It's very clear that in those countries and those areas where cobotics, robots, and higher technology will give us the highest productivity, we're in a situation that we are also short of people, which is good. So always when we're talking in the past to unions, to workers' councils, to people representatives, we had very good arguments because we basically could never find in those countries where we first would install technology enough people to do the job for us. So we were in real need of educated or people and people who were ready to do the job. So it's so in those countries, robotics or cobots is not something that will replace people's work, but that will enable us to do the job at all, because with the current labor force in many of those developed countries, it's very difficult to find people at all who would do the job for us. And then with that, it's much easier to talk to unions, to go through co-determination, which we have to do in many countries, and make sure that unions agree to things, to all new systems that we put in. And of course, as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, you're always in a big tension now, because we hear from the industry that the industry has lost 20%, 25, 30% of the turnover currently. Everybody is running for cash. Everybody tries to survive and do whatever it takes. And cobotics, robotics, or IoT are tools that would help you to come out of this situation with much more strength. But it really takes some really good decisions and very well thought through decisions to invest into the right category now, because money to invest is now very, very limited, and you really have to consider where do you put your money for the future. And I believe that technology like cobotics especially can help you to find the space to put the money in, to be able to not only get your labor force up, but also come with more strengths and much better positioned out of the current COVID-19 situation.
Absolutely. Diana, if I may come back to you, we've heard Alexander say as well that obviously the labor markets are different. Also, the adoption of cobotics as such are different in the different markets. Can you confirm that? Do you see that? And is there a correlation between the two there?
Yes. So what we see is there can be some fluctuations, but even, for instance, in Asia. So if some people have the perception that China is a country of throw workers at it, but even in that country, we are seeing a large uptick in cleaning organizations and facility management groups saying, how can we employ automated options so that we can reduce our labor requirements? What can we do to be more productive with who we have to work with? So even in regions that we thought traditionally were not as worried about automation, they are really jumping up to figure out how can I become more effective like that. Yes. And we also see too, this is an opportunity. Yes, we have a workforce that oftentimes might have difficulty handling something that's a little more sophisticated, but there are those pockets of employees that are looking for a way to see more value in what they do, to see it as a bit more of a career. And so you also have an opportunity to use your use of technology like this to show them a path through the organization to maybe get more involved in something that's a little sexier for them. It makes them want to come to work during the day or night. So that's also a factor.
Absolutely, thank you. Peter, from an operational perspective, where would you see the barriers in the implementation of cobotics, and how can we resolve those barriers?
Well, I think there's at least two types of barriers. The real ones that are, real barriers to implementing this type of technology, and then there's the more sort of emotional or perceived barriers to this. And if I started with the real ones, obviously you have to have a workplace where this makes sense. It has to have some relatively spacious areas, hallways, lobby areas, open spaces, floor spaces where it would make sense to use this type of technology within cleaning, or reception areas if it's more like a relationship type of cobotics we're using. So it sort of has to make sense, and you have to have an environment where this makes sense. And if it's very dense, high density, very low level floor space for cleaning robots, that it wouldn't make a lot of sense. And then secondly, one of the other real ones is that it takes a lot of training and engagement from the staff, and it does. So you need to make sure you have your cleaning staff with you on the journey of implementing this type of technology. Now, if you look at some of the perceived ones, there are a few others. One of the big ones, especially that Alexander and I worked with when we were at ISS together, was the finance piece of this, that these types of this type of technology is very expensive. And I think what we have seen now is that we've come to a price point where this makes sense, where the return on investment actually is very attractive, and where cobotics are sold as a service with a monthly fee to overcome that sort of initial investment that we are looking at. So I think that is now being more of a perceived barrier than it is actually a real barrier to this. And when you look at the ROI, it's actually quite high in terms of the efficiencies that you can drive from this. Secondly, one of the perceived barriers is the quality, that the quality will not be as good as if this was manual labor. And again, as also Diana alluded to, we're now getting to a quality level that is much higher and much more consistent that we could actually do via manual labor. So where it makes sense to implement these, you actually get a relatively high quality improvement on some of this stuff. Then also safety. There's a perceived barrier that this is unsafe and people can be rolled over by these type of robots. And again, this technology is filled with sensor and a lot of safety installments that actually makes them incredibly safe at the workplace, both for the people that work with it or operates them, and when the people that are in the workplace that are being sort of encountered by a moving independent robots that we are working on here. So these are more perceived barriers. I think they probably were very large issues that we had to deal with a couple of years ago. These are no longer issues. And then finally, there's also the more sort of individual view on how this type of technology sort of supports us. That, believing that the robots are taking over the world and there's nothing left for us humans to do at the end of the day. And that's why I actually like the term cobotics, because I think it's changing that barrier, that this is something we do collaborative. There's a human and a robot working together. And the efficiency, of course, will result ultimately in freed up resources. That's also where we calculate the return on investment in some of these things. but it's not that it's sort of taking over. It's complementing what we do, and it's freeing up resources for us to do different things in the workplace. And I think that's also an important barrier to overcome.
Absolutely. Alexander, yes, please.
Yeah, there's another point when you look at productivity and deployment from a business case. It takes some time to train people and get cobotics, robotics, and technology into your organization. It's not done from one day to another. It can take between a couple of months, and if you go very deep and want to change a lot, it can take years. It's kind of a cultural change that you accept things. At the same time, we have to understand that our labor forces work very hard, and even if they work very hard, the productivity that you can get from your labor force every year is 1%. You have salary labor increases, you get productivity gains, but the net productivity gain is maybe 1 or 2%. In development of technology like cobots or IoT and that kind of stuff, you usually have productivity in the technology which is double digit, between 10 and 15%. So for a service company, it's very important to find the right point of time when to invest and start with something like this. Because if you realize too late that your competitors are getting 10, 20% productivity every year, and then you start to invest your 3-4 years later, and 3-4 years with 10% per year means you're cost and price wise 30% behind the market. So it's also very delicate when you talk about when do we start and how deep do we go and when do we get used to that kind of stuff. It's about time now. It's already a little late because many companies do that already, to get used to cobotics, to get used to the technology, to be on the right curve when the productivity hits everybody.
Diana,
yeah, and I would say another thing to consider too is the safety aspect, the safety gains, because in addition, like Alexander was saying, we're squeezing more and more out of these people, and there's a limit and there's a breaking limit. And when you have a worker who is rushing or trying so hard to get the same amount of work done in a certain amount of time, you can actually start to have workplace injuries and incidents that can rise. And whether it's in that situation or in others, that has a cost to the organization. And so when you can alleviate that a little bit, give them that little bit of time to be able to get the job done correctly, then that can start to have some increases to your savings in that area as well.
Mm-hmm. Peter, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just to add to Alexander's and Diana's comments, because I think also freeing up those resources that cobotics will allow us to could potentially, I mean, you could take some of the gains in from a financial perspective, but you could also increase the experience in the workplace. To Diana's point, allow your workers to engage in other types of activities in the workplace with the extra time they'll get freed up by working in a cobotics type of environment, to increase the conversations with employees, a visible daylight cleaning type of setup. But it could also be that you free up resources to do other work, like small little extra services in the office, watering plants, whatever it could be that you use these resources for. And that just increases the whole service level and the perceived service quality of your workforce, which I think, and it also increases the job satisfaction of what you do, because it becomes more varied, the work, the tasks that you do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Niels?
No, I think it's great discussion. I think in the past, and really going back to both Alexander and Diana's and Peter's point, in the past, most of the technology providers, they've just kind of like given the equipment and walked away, right? Stone cold. No, not even a conversation around behavioral adjustments. Just here you go, it's done, deal is done, we've got our cash, and so be it. See what happens. And that's really, it sounds really quite rough, but all the clients that I'm talking to right now, that's exactly what they're saying. So there's a lot more to this, and I think it's really important to take a real holistic view, because cobotics is much more than just technology. You know, outside what I mentioned earlier on around the commercial models. You know, we also have new operating models. So and managers are assigning the work to cobots and teams based on the capabilities and the strength of each of them. So so we're really going into this, you know, cultural behaviors, and in order to get those teams to work collaborative and harmoniously alongside cobots, and being able to monitor and manage them. So I think starting a cobotic journey isn't as simple as putting in an order for a dozen cobots. It's kind of, it really requires you to have a much more defined and clearer strategy right from the outset. And you know, coming back to the point that was made earlier on, you know, if we're talking about education and training, this is not just about how the material or how the cobots actually work, but also kind of like how they can adapt that into something that they've done for 50 years, and you know, is kind of now changing. So that adjustment that needs to have a lot of hand holding, a lot of TLC. So you know, so how do you do that? I think one of the key methods to look at that is by creating really partnerships, and you know, so we have to start providing kind of FM leaders and businesses with the support and the guidance that they need to manage this holistic change. And it's not just enough to just go a standard way. So so what we have really looked at is how we can introduce performance-based KPIs, looking at risk sharing, risk and reward, working collaborative, innovative, joint innovation roadmaps and strategies to help each other to look how we best can manage this reinvention. So traditional input-based models, which, you know, I think is probably, you know, 85% currently of all contracts in the industry, and especially, you know, now during the pandemic, it's such a rigid input-based contracts are simply not relevant. So it's really important to create more dynamic and predictable business environments. So you know, this is where cobots can be a real game changer for FM leaders, and hence why we think this is the way forward.
And I hear everybody saying that we almost needed some change management to implement this into our organizations. It's like a new way of working that we are implementing. It's like a new office environment, etc. So to make sure that everybody knows how to use it, is skilled enough to do it, knows how to collaborate, how to integrate it into the culture of the organization. Some change management is required as well. Alexander, I thought that you wanted to add something.
Yeah, one more word of caution, you know, cobotics and other technologies are a way of digitizing your business. And you have to do your homework first a little bit. So you have to have kind of a process definition. You have to have some standard work in the organization. So if you are purely a business which relies on people who have done it for 25 years, there's nothing documented. You really don't know who is where and where is somebody going at what time. If we ask people, it doesn't exist, but I have seen it too many times in my own organization where it shouldn't exist at all. So it's there, and there is some preparation and some homework you have to do, some fundamental things in documentation, process definition, and some standards that you have to fulfill before you invest into technology and cobotics.
Sure. Diana?
Yes, and I think, you know, to add on to Alexander's point, and not just with cobotics, but with any kind of data and digitization, because we have so many more smart buildings now. There's smart dispensers. There's so many ways that the data can actually be the one way to gain time back that you thought you didn't have any more time to gain back from. And so that takes, like you're saying, you can't just go from, you know, paper and pencil straight into the digital world. But even if you are a bit digital, you do need to make sure, are you using that data properly? We see so many companies that leave productivity knowledge on the floor because they're maybe running too fast or they don't have the time at the management level or the mid-management level to really utilize that. So we encourage people, really dig into that, and whether that's with cobotics or other digital options in cleaning, go back now and look again, because there's probably something there that you can now use in a different way or use more effectively, and that can really make a difference still.
We can't hear you, Laura.
Laura, we can't hear you.
Sorry. We've prepared some polling questions for our audience as well. We'd like to get some interaction and some discussion in the webinar. We wanted to start first after this discussion with what is your biggest barrier with regards to adopting cobotics? And you can choose from the list below. Please select only one. Either it's uncertain about how it will impact human resources and jobs, or it seems difficult to implement into your existing systems, or the learning curve is just too steep or seems too steep, or you think it's cost prohibitive. So I'd invite the attendees to take a vote for one of these 4 options on what is your biggest barrier in regards to adopting cobotics. And in the meantime, maybe I have a question from the audience. How could we overcome the concerns about cyber spying by the robots? Can imagine that there's a lot of concerns from the data security teams that the robots are listening or seeing, processing data that is sensitive. So I think that's an excellent question to start from. We can take that maybe at the end of the discussion. If we look at the results from the poll, there's 2, well, let's say almost 3 questions that or answers that pop up. The majority of the people with 34% think they're still uncertain about how it will impact human resources and jobs. So people are still afraid how that will result in on the work floor when it comes to jobs. 29% seems it's difficult to implement into existing systems, and 24% thinks it's cost prohibitive. Only 12% thinks it's too steep of a learning curve. So training, if we get the proper training, we should be able to do the job. But the uncertainty of how it will impact our human resources and jobs, that's apparently something that that's still one of the big question marks, and we've covered that obviously in the discussion. Would somebody of you would like to comment on this? Diana?
I think, we come across things like this even with simpler changes in cleaning operations. And it comes back to a couple key basics of human nature. One is talk about why and what's in it for me. And we often have seen great case studies of cleaning organizations that have gone to the workforce and said, we are looking at doing something to make your job easier. You help tell us, where do you see opportunities? Even workers who are illiterate, who you may think are not able to be at a management level or supervisory level, they are observing things every day, and no one's asking them how to make it better. And so when you start to involve them, that can really help in terms of them starting to feel like they take ownership of something like this. And then they can also start to have a little bit of fun with it too. So it really comes down to some of those human nature basics.
Absolutely. I'd like to go to our second polling question to the audience, and that is referring back to the title of this webinar. It is, can cobotics accelerate the recovery for facility management post-COVID-19? And you can say yes, no, or don't know, or not sure. So please take a vote. In the meantime, I have a quick question to our panelists. Can somebody comment on the data analytics and how robotics can support with that? I think that's something that you were referring to as well, Diana, on the data that comes out of that, and that you would actually need some interpretation related to that. Would you be able to comment on that, Diana?
Sure. So the reality is that a lot of us have KPIs that we're having to answer to in our organizations. And now, as cleaning is under the spotlight, people, stakeholders in the organization who may not have been asking for the cleaning service data are going to start asking for it. And how are you working with your cleaning service provider, your in-house teams, your vendors, and your data supplying equipment to really come up with that narrative and that story? And there's ways to also make that more automated so that you can have that report available before they come calling for it. So those are some of the things that we've looked at. And I'm sure maybe Niels, you could talk about a little bit more detailed of the kinds of analytics that are most asked for right now.
No, absolutely. I mean, this comes completely back to what I started to talk about, which was the consistency. And I think everybody's the same. I'm no different. Feeling a little bit nervous of going back into the office and going through an environment that's shared. And you almost want to have a new level of standards being available to you to understand whether it's actually advisable to go back into the office. And so what we're seeing, and obviously we are only playing a small role into this, but specifically from a cobotic perspective, people really want to understand what is the level of the building cleanliness and what's the consistency that's been held. So the data that they're actually looking for is more about kind of like, almost how many square meters has been covered, and can you demonstrate it in terms of how that looks if I look at mapping and how that looks across my entire building. And then we see very, very quickly, and the response from our clients is really overwhelmingly positive to say, we actually feel that we've upped our consistency instead of the usual kind of spot cleaning that we've been used to near to 100%, which is probably the number one requirement from most clients. The other piece of data that our clients are looking for is predominantly focused around what kind of challenges are being seen when doing the cleaning process. So the cobot is programmed to do a certain role. If we compare that to what's been programmed, what is the difference? So what is the difference to what is normally cleaned versus what's now being cleaned? And that's harder to answer because that's where the collaboration comes in. But in general, it is about uptime. So if you think about if you program a cobot to do 1,500 square meters, how much out of those 1,500 square meters is actually being covered, and to what degree?
Perfect. Thank you. I suggest we go in to have a look at the results of this polling. And I think this was a very useful discussion so far, as almost 70% is confirming that cobotics can accelerate the recovery for FM post-COVID-19. Still 20% is not sure and don't know. So I think there's still some information sharing to be done, and definitely some change management there from our side.
Yeah, I think one point, Lara, that I kind of didn't make in my answer was something that we've really seen, which is obviously due to the whole situation with COVID-19, is that in some areas people don't necessarily, and especially the managers and supervisors, they don't want to put people in the front line and try and avoid that as much as possible. Whether we are in a, if you think about a hotel environment, or in a hospital environment. It really helps to collaborate with the cleaning teams to make them feel safer in their environment. So, and I think that's something that I didn't answer earlier on. I just want to add that to the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not only just the office workers, but also the office cleaners who need to feel safe and reassured to come back to the office. I'd like to, first of all, thank the audience for submitting already great questions, because we received quite a lot of them in our Q&A. I would like to take some time to go over these, and I would like to start with the first question. What is the return on investment of deploying cobotics to support facility management in the workplace? Niels, can I address that to you again?
Yes, sure, no problem. I think I probably already answered the question somewhat, but I'll just, it's fairly straightforward. Cobots perform better and more consistent than people. Specific on repetitive and kind of time-intensive tasks, meaning that staff can spend more on tasks that they apply their skills. So, and give you an example. That's probably the best way of saying it. We had a client that was on an input-based contract, and they introduced cobots into their organization. The CEO came early in the morning into the office, and he realized that the entire front of the building was clear of leaves. And he was a little bit surprised by that, because they didn't have a contract to do that. It was not part of their contract. So he phoned the managing director of the large FM company and said, like, look, this is great. How come we're seeing a lot of additional benefits coming to our contract? As he coined it, this was the start of them looking at changing their input-based contract to an outcome-based, more of a vested partnership. And that's really where, I think the ROI lies.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another question is, how can these technologies help to improve project management within FM? Peter, can I give this question to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. There's no doubt that utilizing cobotics in terms of setting up. I mean, Niels has already alluded to one great example of how it can help FM to sort of project manage this stuff and what is the outcome of this. But greater accuracy, more real-time information, better data, better performance and reliability in terms of the quality and the performance delivered by the cobotics setup, but also from the data captured by the technology, and that leads to smarter and faster decisions. That again leads to more efficiency, better productivity, and improved service level and ability to free up resources to do other things. As we talked about earlier, take a more holistic view of the workplace. And again, Niels' story is a great one, because I think that's where we need to get to, that we take a responsibility of the outcome of what it is that we are providing, and not just having a headcount based input spec that we're trying to manage by. So it's, for me, it's for facility managers, and facility managers love this stuff, because they get additional resources, and they'll be able to better drive the experience at the workplace with setups like this.
Great, thank you. Another question, what infrastructure and support is available to ensure successful deployment of robotics within facilities? Alexander.
Yeah, that's a really great question, because as Niels said, in the past, we have had situations that technology companies came, thrown your technology on you, and you were sitting with it there, and you had to learn yourself. But those companies being successful understand that they also have to learn about their systems, because they have to continuously develop them. The innovation engine has to run. You have to improve your software about every month now. Every 6 months, you have to send an update. The machine has to become smarter and better. And this can only be done if you are on this curve, on this journey together. So you have to have people on your side as an implementer who know something about lean or processes and design or cleaning excellence, but you will also have support from those companies like Neil's company, like SoftBank Robotics, who are interested in developing continuously and improving. And doing that together is the right way of doing it and will allow you to go on this steep learning curve and improve productivity and well-being of your employees quickly.
Perfect. I would love to ask just a last question there, Niels, if that's okay with you, because we're coming up the hour. What do you see as being the most useful application of cobots within cleaning? Diana, could you answer that one?
Sure thing. So, traditionally, a lot of people thought you needed a facility with a large floor space because that's what these machines needed. But we're moving more toward locations with narrower space because the machines are honed and more improved. You've got the ability to do vacuum sweeping versus just hard floor care. And really now it's not about your physical space. It's about where are you trying to balance your cleaning needs, especially in the COVID-19 world where disinfecting now has an impact on what you need to get done. And when you're looking at this, there's a couple other things too. There's where are you trying to normalize your services? Do you have a high turnover rate or high rates of absenteeism in shifts? Because then if you have a consistent capability to do certain tasks, then that can help normalize that for you. There's also a lot of facilities right now that are having to figure out how to flex their workload because they might have had a smaller crew because of less traffic or capacity, and they're going to have fluctuating traffic or occupancy over the next so many months or even longer. And so how are you going to take an airport from 10 to 15% capacity back up to higher levels and maybe back down again? And so if you can have some creative technology that can help you normalize some of your tasks, then it reduces that part of what you need to figure out how to manage that's going to be fluctuating. And lastly, I guess I would say, facilities or businesses that say our budgets are tight, this is out of my reach, whether it's this technology, other technology, now is the time you need to be creative. And that's when you should be considering options like cobotics or like other data sharing type technologies or even, not all basic cleaning tasks will go away, even in a world with ideal cobotics, right? So now's the time to look at it because it's not just about appearance on the line anymore. This is about your occupant health and the confidence of your employees and your customers to be able to come back to a life and a business level that they need. And that has a high value to your bottom line. So that really affects every facility, in my opinion. And that's how I would look at it in a bigger picture.
Absolutely. Thank you, Diana, for that.
Can't hear you, Diana.
Can't hear you.
Lara, sorry.
I'd like to thank the audience again for the great questions. We've got a lot more than the ones that we've covered, but unfortunately, our time's up. As a reminder, you can find more answers on cobotics by downloading the free white paper provided by SoftBank Robotics. And I also want to let everyone know we have a follow-up on this topic on June 25th. And we'll send out a registration link along with the full recording of this session. And before we go, I'd like to invite everybody to have a visit at IFMA's website if you want to learn more about what we do and how we can support your professional career. Take a look at our website. And I'd like to thank the panelists for this excellent discussion. And I'd like to thank SoftBank Robotics for allowing us to tackle this topic. And I hope to see you all again on the 25th. Thanks, everybody.